Lieutenant Otto Carius never wanted to be famous. He never wanted his name to be spoken in the same breath as legends, never wanted to be called a hero or an ace or any of those grand titles that people love to throw around. He just wanted to do his duty, protect his crew, and maybe, if he was lucky, survive long enough to see the end of the war. But fate had other plans for him, and by the summer of 1944, he had become something he never imagined, one of the most successful tank commanders in military history, with over 150 enemy vehicles destroyed. This is his story, the truth behind the numbers, the reality behind the legend. Otto Carius was born in a small town in southwestern Germany in 1922. His family was ordinary, middle class, nothing special. His father worked as a clerk, and his mother raised him and his two sisters. Otto was a small kid, thin and not particularly athletic. When he tried to join the military in 1940, they almost rejected him because he was too short and didn't meet the physical requirements. The army didn't want him because he was 5'6" and weighed maybe 130 pounds, soaking wet. But he was persistent, and eventually they accepted him into the tank corps, probably because they needed bodies more than they needed perfect specimens. Basic training was brutal. The instructors seemed to take particular pleasure in making life difficult for someone his size. They'd load the recruits down with equipment that weighed almost as much as Otto did and make them run obstacle courses in full gear. More than once he thought about quitting, about telling them they were right and he wasn't cut out for this, but something stubborn in him refused to give up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was determination, or maybe he just didn't want to prove them right. Otto was assigned to the 20th Panzer Division in early 1941, just in time for the invasion of the Soviet Union. His first tank was a Panzer 38T, a Czech-designed light tank that was already outdated when the war started. It was cramped, under-armored and undergunned, but it was his. He was the loader at first, not the commander, just a kid trying to figure out how to stay alive in a metal coffin racing across the Russian steppes. The Eastern Front in 1941 was chaos. The Soviet Union was vast, endless, and filled with more tanks than the Germans had ever imagined. Intelligence had told them the Russians had maybe a few thousand tanks. The reality was they had tens of thousands, maybe more. Most of them were obsolete, easy prey for German guns, but there were enough T-34s and KV-1s mixed in to make things interesting. And by interesting, that meant terrifying. Otto saw his first combat in June 1941 near the town of Raseiniai in Lithuania. They were advancing when suddenly a massive Soviet tank appeared ahead of them, a KV-1, bigger than anything he'd ever seen. Their 37mm gun bounced shots off its armor like pebbles off a castle wall. The KV-1 didn't seem to care that they were shooting at it. It just kept coming, crushing one of their Panzer IIs under its treads like it was made of cardboard. They had to call in the 88mm anti-aircraft guns to finally stop it. That's when Otto learned his first important lesson about tank warfare. Size matters, armor matters, and having a bigger gun than the other guy really matters. By late 1942, Otto had been promoted to tank commander and had earned his first few kills. Nothing spectacular, just doing his job, spotting targets before they spotted them, making sure his gunner had clear shots, keeping his crew alive. The Soviet tanks were getting better, more numerous, but the Germans were learning too. They learned to use terrain to fire from concealment, to hit the Soviets from the flanks where their armor was thinner. They learned that the T-34 had excellent armor and a good gun, but poor visibility and bad crew training. They learned to exploit those weaknesses. In early 1943, Otto was selected for training on the new Tiger high-heavy tank. When he first saw the Tiger, he thought someone was playing a joke. It was massive, over 50 tons, with armor up to 4 inches thick in places, and an 88mm gun that could penetrate any Allied tank at ranges over a mile. It was like comparing a pickup truck to a semi. The Tiger wasn't just a tank, it was a rolling fortress, a steel monster that could dominate any battlefield. But the Tiger came with challenges. It was slow, mechanically unreliable, and drank fuel like a drunk sailor. It needed constant maintenance, and if it broke down, they'd better hope they could fix it quickly or destroy it before the enemy captured it. The tracks were so wide that they had to swap them for narrower transport tracks just to move it by rail. Everything about the Tiger was complicated, expensive, and difficult. But when it worked, when all 56 tons were running smoothly and the gun was zeroed in, there was nothing on earth that could stand against it. Otto's first mission in a Tiger was near Leningrad in August 1943. He was attached to Schwerpanzerabteilung 502, a heavy tank battalion tasked with stopping Soviet breakthrough attempts. The Soviets had launched a major offensive, throwing waves of tanks at German lines, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. They had learned from their earlier defeats and were using better tactics, better coordination, better equipment, but they hadn't faced Tigers before, not in significant numbers. Otto's Tiger was positioned in a small village, hull down behind a low ridge that concealed most of the tank's body while leaving the turret exposed. His crew consisted of 4 men: his gunner, Kramer, a farmer's son from Bavaria with eyes like a hawk; his loader, Schmidt, young but strong and quick; his driver, Becker, who could make the Tiger dance despite its bulk; and his radio operator, Weber, who could fix anything mechanical and keep them in communication with command. The first Soviet attack came at dawn. Through his commander's cupola, Otto could see them coming across the open field, a line of T-34s advancing in formation, maybe 20 tanks. They were about 1,500 meters away, just entering effective range for their gun. Kramer, target left, T-34. Distance 1,500, Otto called out calmly, even though his heart was racing. Identified, Kramer replied, his eye pressed to the gun sight. Fire when ready. The Tiger's 88mm gun roared, the entire tank rocking back from the recoil. Through his optics, Otto saw the round strike the lead T-34 squarely in the glacis plate. The Soviet tank shuddered, stopped, and erupted in flames. The crew bailed out, running for cover. Target destroyed. Next target, center T-34, distance 1,400. They fell into a rhythm. Kramer would acquire the target. Schmidt would load the round, the gun would fire, and another Soviet tank would die. The Tiger's gun was incredibly accurate at these ranges, and the Soviet tanks couldn't effectively return fire. Their 76mm guns couldn't penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at this distance, so they kept advancing, trying to close the range, trying to get to a distance where they could hurt them. But Otto didn't let them. For 30 minutes they fired methodically, picking off T-34s like ducks in a shooting gallery. When the Soviets finally withdrew, 12 Soviet tanks were burning in that field, and Otto's Tiger hadn't taken a single hit. It was like fighting with a sword against opponents armed with sticks. The technological advantage was overwhelming. That day, Otto destroyed 7 enemy tanks. It was the beginning of what would become a tally that would eventually exceed 150 confirmed kills. But he wasn't counting at the time. He was just trying to survive, trying to keep his crew alive, trying to do his duty. The numbers came later, when other people started paying attention, when someone in command decided that tank aces were good for morale and propaganda. Over the next year, the pattern repeated itself dozens of times. The Soviets would attack, the Germans would defend, and the Tigers would exact a terrible toll. The Tiger wasn't invincible, far from it. They lost tanks to mechanical breakdowns, to lucky shots through weak points, to overwhelming numbers, to air attacks. But in a straight fight, at range, on favorable terrain, the Tiger was the king of the battlefield. Otto remembered one particular engagement near Narva in Estonia in February 1944. The Soviets had launched another massive offensive, trying to break through to the Baltic states. His company was positioned to defend a critical road junction. Intelligence reported that a Soviet tank brigade was approaching, over 50 tanks, including some of the new IS-2 heavy tanks that actually posed a threat to the Tiger. They prepared their positions carefully. The road junction was surrounded by marshland that would bog down any tank that tried to go cross-country, so the Soviets would be forced to use the roads. They positioned 3 Tigers in concealed positions overlooking the junction, with clear fields of fire and good escape routes. Then they waited. The Soviets came in the afternoon, their tanks strung out along the road in a long column. It was a tactical mistake, advancing in column rather than in formation, but the terrain didn't give them much choice. The lead elements entered the kill zone, and Otto opened fire. What followed was a masterclass in defensive tank warfare. They destroyed the lead tanks first, blocking the road. Then they destroyed the rear tanks, trapping the column. The middle tanks tried to maneuver, but the marshland caught them. Some got stuck, some threw tracks trying to escape. Some just sat there waiting to be destroyed because their commanders didn't know what to do. In 45 minutes, they destroyed 27 Soviet tanks and tank destroyers without losing a single Tiger. It wasn't courage or heroism. It was just good tactics, good positioning, and superior equipment. The Soviets were brave. Otto had to give them that. They kept trying to fight back, kept trying to maneuver even when it was hopeless. But bravery doesn't stop an 88mm armor-piercing round traveling at over half a mile per second. After that engagement, Otto's kill count was over 80. People started talking about him, writing about him in newspapers and magazines back home. He hated it. Every article that called him a hero felt like a lie. He wasn't a hero. He was just a soldier doing his job, and his job involved killing other soldiers who were also just doing their jobs. There was nothing heroic about it. It was just war, brutal and ugly and necessary. By summer 1944, the war had turned decisively against Germany. The Western Allies had landed in Normandy. The Soviets were pushing west with unstoppable momentum, and Germany was fighting on two fronts with dwindling resources. The Tiger was still effective, but they were losing them faster than they could be replaced. Every destroyed Tiger was a loss they couldn't afford, and the enemy had unlimited replacements for every tank they destroyed. In July 1944, Otto's unit was transferred to the Western Front to help counter the Allied breakout from Normandy. It was a strange experience, fighting the Americans and British after years on the Eastern Front. The Western Allies fought differently than the Soviets. They were more cautious, more methodical, but they had advantages the Soviets didn't have: complete air superiority and artillery that could level entire grid squares in minutes. Otto's first engagement against American tanks was near the town of Cagny. They were defending against an advance by British and Canadian forces supported by Sherman tanks. The Shermans were inferior to the Tiger in almost every way: thinner armor, smaller gun, less range, but they had numbers on their side. For every Tiger the Germans fielded, the Allies had 10 Shermans, and while they couldn't penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at range, they could swarm them, flank them, call in airstrikes, or just wait for them to break down. Otto destroyed 14 Shermans that day before being forced to withdraw, not because they were defeated, but because Allied aircraft had spotted their position and were vectoring in fighter bombers. The Tiger could defeat any tank on the ground, but it was helpless against aircraft. One rocket or bomb in the right place, and 56 tons of steel became 56 tons of scrap metal. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. They were constantly retreating, constantly outnumbered, constantly low on fuel and ammunition, but they kept fighting because that's what soldiers do. They kept their Tigers running despite mechanical problems that should have sidelined them. They kept scoring kills because they were good at their jobs, and their equipment, when it worked, was still superior to anything the Allies fielded. By August 1944, Otto's confirmed kill count had reached 120. Someone in propaganda thought this was wonderful news and wanted to make a big deal about it. They wanted to give him medals, have him do interviews, maybe even pull him off the front lines for a publicity tour. He refused. His place was with his crew, with his Tiger, fighting where he was needed. The medals could wait until the war was over. There was one engagement that stood out in Otto's memory, one day when everything came together perfectly, and he understood why people were making such a fuss about his kill count. It was late August, near the town of Mezieres. Allied forces were pushing hard, trying to encircle German units. Otto's Tiger Company, reduced to just 4 operational tanks, was tasked with holding a key crossroads to allow other units to withdraw. They knew it was a desperate situation. Intelligence reported at least a full tank battalion approaching, maybe 40 or 50 tanks, supported by infantry and artillery. 4 Tigers against 50 Shermans and Cromwells. The math didn't look good, but they'd faced worse odds before. They positioned themselves carefully, using the terrain to maximum advantage. 2 Tigers forward in concealed positions, 2 Tigers back as a reserve. Then they waited, listening to the rumble of approaching tanks, watching the dust cloud on the horizon grow larger. The Allies came in the early afternoon, a long column of armor advancing confidently down the road. They probably thought they'd overwhelmed German defenses, that the road was clear. They were wrong. Otto let them get close, maybe 800 meters, close enough that even their guns could be dangerous. Then he opened fire. The 2 forward Tigers fired simultaneously, and 2 lead Shermans exploded. The column stopped, confused, trying to locate where the shots came from. They fired again, destroyed 2 more tanks. Now the Allies knew where they were, and they started maneuvering, trying to flank them, calling in artillery. This is where the Tigers' advantages really showed. They could engage the enemy at ranges where they couldn't effectively fight back. Even when the Allies flanked them and got closer shots, their armor held. Rounds that would have destroyed any other German tank just bounced off the Tigers' thick plate. And their gun, that beautiful 88mm, destroyed everything it hit. The battle lasted 3 hours. The Allies kept probing, kept attacking, kept trying to overwhelm them with numbers, but they held. Every time the enemy maneuvered into a good position, Otto destroyed them. Every time they thought they had his Tiger flanked, he'd relocate and catch them from a new angle. His crew worked like a well-oiled machine, loading and firing, acquiring and destroying, moving and repositioning. When it was finally over, when the Allies pulled back to regroup, 19 Allied tanks were burning around that crossroads. Otto's Tiger alone had destroyed 8 of them, bringing his total confirmed kills to 132. The other Tigers in his company had accounted for the rest. They'd held the crossroads for 6 hours, allowing thousands of German soldiers to withdraw safely, and all 4 Tigers survived the battle without serious damage. That night, sitting in his Tiger with his exhausted crew, Otto finally understood what the numbers meant. It wasn't about glory or heroism or being the best. It was about effectiveness, about doing the job so well that other soldiers could survive, could retreat, could fight another day. Every tank he destroyed was a tank that couldn't kill German infantry, couldn't overrun their positions, couldn't end the war faster. In a war they were losing, every small victory mattered. By September 1944, Otto's kill count had surpassed 150. The exact number is debated by historians. Some say 150, some say 155, some say even higher. The truth is, Otto stopped counting precisely after 140. In the chaos of retreat, with units being destroyed or scattered, with command structures breaking down, accurate record-keeping became impossible. But the conservative estimate is 150 confirmed kills, making him one of the most successful tank commanders in history. The world was stunned when the numbers became public. Even Allied intelligence officers couldn't believe it was possible. 150 enemy vehicles destroyed by a single commander? It seemed like propaganda, like an exaggeration designed to boost German morale. But it was real, verified by multiple sources, confirmed by after-action reports and battle assessments. The Tiger made it possible, and a combination of good tactics, better training, and honestly just luck kept Otto alive long enough to achieve it. But there was a darker side to those numbers that people didn't often talk about. Every tank Otto destroyed likely had a crew of 4 or 5 men. That's 600 to 750 enemy soldiers killed or wounded by his actions. 600 to 750 fathers, sons, brothers, husbands. When he was in combat, when the adrenaline was pumping and survival was the only thing that mattered, Otto didn't think about that. But afterward, in the quiet moments, he thought about it constantly. Were they good men? Probably. Most soldiers are just ordinary people doing what they're told, fighting for their country, trying to survive. Did they deserve to die? That wasn't for Otto to judge. In war, you don't get to make those choices. You fight or you die. You kill or you're killed. There's no morality in combat, no right or wrong, just survival and duty. Otto was wounded in October 1944 during a battle near the German border. Nothing serious, just shrapnel from an artillery near miss that caught him while he was outside the tank. But it was enough to get him pulled off the front lines for medical treatment. By the time he recovered, the war was nearly over. The Tiger battalions had been decimated. Most of the experienced commanders were dead or wounded, and Germany was fighting on its own soil against enemies from all directions. He spent the final months of the war training new tank crews, teaching them the lessons he'd learned through years of combat. Most of them would never get the chance to use those lessons. The Tigers were gone, destroyed in battle, or abandoned for lack of fuel. The new crews were being assigned to whatever vehicles were available, often obsolete tanks or captured enemy equipment. The Third Reich was collapsing, and everyone knew it. The war ended in May 1945. Otto surrendered to American forces and spent several months as a prisoner of war. It was strange being on the other side of the wire, being the one searched and interrogated instead of doing the searching and interrogating. The American officers were fascinated by his combat record. They asked endless questions about the Tiger, about tactics, about the Eastern Front. He answered honestly. The war was over, and there was no point in keeping secrets anymore. One American colonel, a tank officer himself, asked Otto how he felt about the number of enemy tanks he'd destroyed. Otto told him the truth. He felt nothing. Not pride, not guilt, not satisfaction, just emptiness. He'd done his duty. He'd protected his crew. He'd survived when so many others hadn't. But he'd also killed hundreds of men who were probably much like him, who probably just wanted to go home to their families. What was he supposed to feel about that? The colonel seemed disappointed by his answer, like he'd expected Otto to be either proudly defiant or deeply remorseful. But war doesn't work that way. You do what you have to do. You survive if you're lucky and skilled, and then you try to live with what you've done. The numbers are just numbers. They don't capture the reality of combat, the fear and chaos and confusion, the split-second decisions that mean life or death. After the war, Otto went home to Germany and tried to build a normal life. He became a pharmacist, ran a small pharmacy in a quiet town, married, had children. He rarely talked about his military service. When people asked, he'd give vague answers and change the subject. The last thing he wanted was to relive those years, to remember the smell of burning tanks and the screams of dying men. But as the decades passed, military historians became interested in his story. They wanted to understand how one man could achieve such a remarkable combat record. They asked for interviews, wanted him to write memoirs, invited him to symposiums and conferences. For years, Otto refused. But eventually he realized that his experiences might have educational value, might help people understand the reality of armored warfare, might serve as a cautionary tale about the costs of war. Otto wrote his memoirs in the 1960s, a book called Tigers in the Mud. It was a straightforward account of his experiences, without glorification or apology, just the truth as he remembered it. The book was surprisingly successful, translated into multiple languages, used in military academies around the world. Apparently, people wanted to understand what it was like to be inside a Tiger tank, to fight against overwhelming odds, to survive when survival seemed impossible. In his later years, Otto met several Allied tank veterans, men who'd fought against Tigers during the war. These meetings were strange at first, confronting men who'd been his enemies, who'd tried to kill him as he'd tried to kill them. But they found common ground in their shared experiences. They'd all seen combat, all faced death, all lost friends. The nationality of the tank didn't matter as much as the universal experience of warfare. One British veteran, a Sherman commander who'd fought in Normandy, told Otto that his biggest fear during the war was encountering a tiger. "We called them tigers," and he said. "If someone spotted a tiger, the rule was simple. Don't engage unless you outnumber it at least 5 to 1, and even then, expect casualties. Your tank was a nightmare for us. We had one advantage: numbers. For every tiger you had, we had 10 Shermans. But even with that advantage, we lost so many good men." Otto didn't know what to say to that. He couldn't apologize for being good at his job, for keeping his crew alive, for doing his duty. But he could acknowledge the courage it took for Sherman crews to face tigers, knowing they were outgunned and out-armored, knowing they'd probably die if they encountered one. That took a special kind of bravery that Otto wasn't sure he possessed. Looking back as an old man, reflecting on events that happened over 70 years ago, Otto had mixed feelings about his wartime service. He wasn't proud of the killing, but he was proud of keeping his crew alive, of doing his duty under impossible circumstances, of demonstrating that skill and tactics could overcome numerical superiority. The Tiger was an extraordinary machine, a technological marvel that dominated every battlefield it appeared on. But it wasn't enough to win the war, because wars aren't won by individual machines or individual soldiers. They're won by industrial capacity, by logistics, by numbers. Germany produced fewer than 1,500 Tigers during the entire war. The Soviets produced over 60,000 T-34s. The Americans and British produced tens of thousands of Shermans. Even if every Tiger destroyed 100 enemy tanks, and some did come close, it wouldn't have been enough. They were fighting a war of attrition that they couldn't win, and the Tiger, for all its capabilities, couldn't change that fundamental reality. Otto's 150 confirmed kills made him famous in certain circles, made him one of the most successful tank commanders in history. But fame didn't change the reality of war. It didn't bring back the dead, didn't heal the wounds, didn't erase the memories. He did his duty as he understood it, fought for his country as millions of others did, and survived through a combination of skill, good equipment, and extraordinary luck. The world was stunned when Otto Carius surpassed 150 kill claims in his Tiger, but Otto wasn't stunned. He was just tired, bone-weary tired, and desperate for the war to end so he could go home. The numbers were impressive, the Tiger was extraordinary, but at the end of the day he was just a small man from a small town who found himself in the middle of history's largest war, doing the best he could to survive and protect the men under his command. That was the truth behind the legend, the reality behind the numbers. 150 kills sounded impressive until you remembered that each one represented 4 or 5 men who died, families who lost sons and fathers and brothers. War wasn't glorious, and tank combat wasn't romantic. It was loud and terrifying and confusing, and you did what you had to do to survive. Sometimes that meant you became very good at destroying enemy tanks. Sometimes that meant your name got remembered while thousands of others were forgotten. But being remembered didn't make Otto a hero. It just made him lucky enough to survive and skilled enough to do his job well. The real heroes were the men who died doing their duty, on both sides, who never got the chance to grow old and tell their stories. Otto survived to tell his, but he never forgot that luck played as large a role as skill, and that every tank he destroyed carried men much like him, who probably had families waiting for them, who probably just wanted to survive and go home. That was the legacy of Otto Carius and his Tiger tank. Not glory, not heroism, just a stark demonstration of what happens when superior technology meets skilled operators in the crucible of war. The world was stunned by the numbers, but anyone who'd experienced combat knew that numbers alone didn't tell the story. They were just a cold, impersonal way to measure something that was anything but cold or impersonal. They were a way to make sense of chaos, to create order from horror, to pretend that war could be quantified and understood. But war couldn't be truly understood unless you'd experienced it. And if you'd experienced it, you probably didn't want to talk about it much. You just wanted to forget, to move on, to live whatever life you had left in peace and quiet. That was all Otto ever wanted, and that was what he finally got after the war ended. The 150 kills were just a number, a statistic in a book, a footnote in history. They didn't define him, didn't explain him, didn't capture the reality of what he experienced. He was just a soldier doing his duty in a war that should never have been fought, using a machine that was too expensive and too complicated and too late to change the outcome. The Tiger was extraordinary, and his combat record was remarkable, but in the end, none of it mattered. Germany lost the war, millions died, and Europe was left in ruins. Otto's 150 confirmed kills didn't prevent any of that. They were just a small part of a much larger tragedy that engulfed an entire continent. That was the real story behind the numbers, the truth that got lost in the legends and the praise. The world was stunned when Otto Carius surpassed 150 kill claims in his Tiger, but perhaps they should have been horrified instead. Horrified that war had reached such an industrial scale that one man could destroy that many machines and kill that many men. Horrified that technology had made killing so efficient and impersonal. Horrified that humanity had created weapons like the Tiger that could dominate battlefields but couldn't prevent the larger catastrophe of war itself. Otto grew old, and most of the men he served with passed away. The Tigers were all destroyed or placed in museums, monuments to a war that should serve as a warning rather than a source of fascination. His 150 kills were a historical fact, verified and documented, but they were also a reminder of war's terrible cost. Every number represented lives lost, families destroyed, futures that never happened. That was what Otto thought about when people asked him about his combat record. Not the tactical victories or the technological superiority, but the human cost of every engagement, every kill, every battle. The world was stunned by the numbers. But Otto lived the reality behind those numbers, and there was nothing stunning about it, just duty, survival, and the desperate hope that maybe, someday, humanity would learn from its mistakes and find better ways to resolve conflicts than putting young men in steel machines and sending them out to kill each other. That was the lesson of his 150 kills, if there was a lesson to be learned. Not that war could be won by superior technology or individual skill, but that war itself was the real enemy, and humanity should do everything in its power to avoid it.